So I've been asked a few times if I could go over demonstrations on how to set up certain exercises using resistance bands and my home gym setup with the bands, platform, and some other equipment. So this is the video I will be doing that. Let's jump into the equipment I'm going to be using if you'd like to purchase it and follow along with the program as well. So the first item I'm using are loop bands, and these are the SunPal resistance loop bands. Next up is a resistance bands bar. It's actually a newer version that I've been testing out and it's worked very well, and that is the Geku or Geku resistance bands bar, and it comes with the hooks on the end as well. Next up is one of the main items people struggle with, and that is the step platform. So this is what we're going to be using for many examples in order to show you how to set it up using the platform. The next item is the ACBE resistance bands handles, spelled ACBEE. And the final item, which is completely optional but something I've come to like, is the Serious Steel resistance band guard. You basically put the bands in it, helps protect them, especially with things when you put it around your back. So that is all the equipment I will be demonstrating for the exercises in this video. Let's go over why I actually use these. So there's really two main reasons, especially with the step platform. The first one is that you standardize each one of your exercises, meaning that because the platform is the same width, you're always getting the same tension throughout the entire time for each workout you do. If you're using your feet and putting them in different places, the tension will be different as you go through that range of motion and stretch the band, because your feet probably aren't exactly placed each and every time. So with this, make sure that you're using something that can standardize your training. That way you know you're reaching progressive overload. And the second reason I like this is you do get an additional 4 inches of pre-stretch in the bands when using it. So this helps you to not have full slack in the band when you are lengthening the muscle, say like a bicep curl. If your hands are near the floor, you're basically at a point where there's not much tension in the band. So this at least allows a little bit of tension throughout the entire range of motion. So there are 2 rules I always follow when doing the setup with the resistance bands and the step platform. And these rules are, first off, that if your hands are at or below your waist throughout the entire range of motion for an exercise, you will double loop the band underneath the platform. Now, if the hands come above the waist, so something like an overhead press or even a biceps curl, you are only going to single loop the band underneath the platform and through the bars or handles. So that is everything you need to know about the setup. From here, I'm going to go over 11 different examples to help you kind of gauge how I set up for each exercise. And if you're doing others, you can try to mimic it for that setup as well. So the first exercise in the list is going to be the front squat. And because your hands are going to be higher than your waist throughout the entire exercise, we are going to be single looping this band underneath the step platform. So now that we know that it's single loop, I actually like to put the band through the resistance band bar hooks first before actually setting up underneath the platform. So what I'll do is I'll hook the band through both one of the hoops on each end, and then basically I'll lift up the platform a little bit off the ground, slide the band underneath it, and then try and even it out on both sides while leaving the bar on top once I get everything set up and ready to go. So the main issue with this exercise is really getting into that starting position. You will basically have to go down into a full squat, get the resistance band bar up at your shoulders. I like to cross my arms personally. You can use like the thumb hook technique, but I like to cross my arms. So basically get the bar on your arms while in the squat position. Make sure you're locked in, and then you're going to just be standing into the squat position. But do you know the other awkward part of this is you actually have all the tension in basically the starting position, which is the very top. So take it slow. Make sure you're not bending or rounding your back too much when getting into that starting position before getting into all of your reps. All right, next up is going to be the suitcase squat. Now I threw this one here as another alternative, and it's actually the one I tend to use mainly because the front squat actually kind of hurts my back a little bit after a while, especially if I'm doing another row type movement in the exercise. So with this one, because our hands are never going above our waist, we will be double looping the band underneath the step platform. And this exercise does use the J hook handles as well. So this setup is a little different. What I like to actually do is take the bands and put the J hook handles into it and then stretch the band out flat on the floor. From there, I take the platform, put it right on top of the bands. That way it's kind of ready to go. Then I just step on the platform, take each handle, kind of make sure they're the same length on each side so they have the same tension, step on it, and then get into my squat position and do my squats that way. Now, one thing to note here is that you probably can't go all the way down in your squat as you will lose tension in the band. You could, of course, do it if you'd like to, but I usually stop a little bit short just to make sure I always have tension throughout. It's really not going to affect your results that much if you're like pretty close to the full squat position, but just make sure you have tension throughout the entire rep. That way, your muscles are always under some kind of stress. All right, the next example is another awkward to get into, and that is going to be the standing overhead press. This exercise is similar to the front squat in that getting into it's a little awkward. It is another single loop band as our hands are always above our hips or waist when doing this, so make sure you are single looping it under. But again, when I do this at first, I actually use the bar, loop through that first, then loop underneath the step platform before trying to get into that starting position. So once you have the bar and the loop underneath the step platform, go ahead, stand on it, and pick up the bar to get into the starting position. Now I like to kind of hold it in the kind of starting locked position up by your shoulders, be in the squat, and then basically just do a squat into standing position with the band at my shoulders and my hands already in position before doing anything. From there, you're just going to do a standard press overhead. Again, make sure you're picking a resistance that you can control the entire time. I don't need you bending over, snapping your back, or having the band doing something weird and snapping. Make sure that whatever you pick is a band that you can control and a resistance that's not too much for you when pressing all the way overhead. All right, our next exercise is a bit different in that we're working the back with the seated row. Now for this one, you will of course need the step platform, you will need J-hook handles and the resistance loop bands. However, I actually like to do this one up against a wall as well, because if you didn't, you have the potential to have the step platform kind of fling right at your face, which could be very, very dangerous. So for this one, I like to actually take the resistance and loop bands first, loop the bands through the J-hook handles, and then kind of get into that seated position with putting the step platform up against the wall, where I let it kind of fall down to my feet a little bit, so there's a little bit of room where I can get the bands behind the step platform, and then I push the platform up against the wall. I'll try to demonstrate as best I can in the video, but basically I'll be looping the bands through the J-hook handles, then going up to the wall with and kind of semi-pressing the step platform against the wall with my feet, but making sure there's enough room where I can loop the band around the step platform, press it then up against the wall to keep it in place, and then do the exercise. I like to press up against the wall because I find that I can easily keep the platform in place. Unlike if you just have it floating around in space, that's where you can get injured with it flying towards your face. All right, my next exercise actually doesn't use the step platform at all. It's going to be a chest press. We're working our chest, of course. I'm going to show it to you with the bar and the J-hook handles. So the first one I will demonstrate is with the resistance band bar. So of course, get your loop bands out, loop them through the hooks on the end, and then we're actually going to throw it around our back. Now, if you do have that band guard, feel free to use that here, as I find this actually works way better because when you have the guard, the bands can't separate. So say you're using 2 or more bands, they can actually ride up your back a bit and kind of get in a weird position where they can actually potentially come up over your shoulders. So with the band guard, they all kind of stay in place as you Velcro them down and make them stay in place. And I've used that for the few exercises now, and it's really kind of been a game changer, I'd say, in making sure that they're in the right position. But yeah, basically what you're gonna do is once you have it looped through the hooks, you kind of just throw the bands up over your head, make sure they're locked just around the shoulder position, make sure you're getting about a 45 degree with your elbows, hands inside the bar, and then you're pushing out to do a chest press with the bar. Now, if you're using the J-hook handles, it's very similar. Simply take the loop bands. An easy way to actually start with the J-hook handles is you kind of just put the bands together, loop the bands into both at the same time, and then just pull the handles apart. Makes it really, really easy to set up with the J-hook handles. So after you do that, now all you need to do is again throw it over your back. But of course, if you want, you can use that band guard again, kind of put it on the floor, make sure you wrap the band guard around it, and then you can throw it up over your back and do the same thing with a chest press with the J-hook handles. All right, our next exercise is going to be the deadlift. So we will be moving back to the standing platform for this one. And again, because we are never going above our waist with our hands, it will be double looped underneath the standing platform. So for this one, you will need the resistance band bar as well. And you're gonna wanna loop the bands through the triangle hooks at the end. And then you want to go down and put the step platform into the band setup. So this can be a little bit awkward depending on how many bands you have. If you do have a lot, you may need to kind of do like one side and then shift over to the other to make sure there's enough room for the step platform to slide into where the bands need to be. And from there, all you're gonna do is stand on the platform, pick up the bar, and get into your starting position. Now, I personally like to do more of a Romanian deadlift to hit more of the hamstrings throughout the exercise, but feel free to do either the Romanian deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, or just a regular deadlift if you wanna do that. But they all have the same setup regardless of which one you pick. All right, moving to the next exercise, and that is the biceps curl. So of course, looking at our first thing, our hands will be going above our waist, meaning we are single looping the band underneath the platform. So for this one, with the single loop, we are going to loop the band through the triangle links on the end of the bar. And then of course, with the platform on the ground, try and shimmy our resistance bands into place underneath the standing platform itself. After that, all you need to do is stand on the platform, get into that starting position with the bar by your waist, kind of make sure your hands are in the right position, and then you're just going to do normal curls as high as you can go, and then all the way back down. Again, you probably want a little bit of tension in the bands as much as you can on the way down. That way, you're not fully slacked when the bands have the least amount of tension. Now from there, our next exercise is going to be hitting the triceps, and this is going to be the standing overhead triceps with the resistance bands bar. Now this one is similar to the overhead press in the setup in that it is single looped because our hands will be above our waist the entire time. But this one you need to watch out for a few other things that I kind of didn't mention in the overhead press that you should probably know now because it is more apparent with this exercise. And that is how you set this up. The band underneath can kind of move around a bit and maybe get stuck. And because you're using the light resistance bands, can actually go and kind of like get stuck under the front or back regions of the step platform. So just make sure it doesn't get caught in one of those sides when you do it. But basically, you loop the bands into the triangles on the bar. You single loop the band underneath the standing platform, stand on the platform, and then because the band here is usually pretty light, I can just kind of pick it up right into position. I don't have to do like any kind of squat thing or something like that. But if you are really strong with your triceps, you may need to squat it up into position, doing it the same way you would with the overhead press, where you have your hands up by your shoulders, keep it there, and then kind of squat it up into position. Then from there, push your hands straight up in the air so they're right above you. And then you want to basically have your hands be able to fall straight back behind your head and push up overhead with your hands. So you want to, again, lock those elbows in place with your hands above your head, and then you're just going to do standing overhead presses from there. But again, make sure that the band doesn't move too much underneath the platform because it can get stuck on each side. One of the cons I've seen with this exercise, but it's not usually too bad once you kind of get the hang of it. All right, moving on to our shoulders with the lateral raise. Now I'm going to give you a few options on this one. You can use the platform or you can decide not to. It's up to you. For this one, there are times where I recommend not using it because if you use the standing platform, even with the lightest band from Somehow, it is very hard to even do like 2 reps. Just because of how it's positioned, you're pulling really far out with your arms. You're kind of just in a weakened position in this exercise. It makes it just hard to do so in general. So if you want to just stand on the band, you can even just put 2 feet together or just use 1 foot. Just make sure whatever you do the same thing each time. I wouldn't separate your feet. Just keep them either together or use 1 foot as the anchor point for the lateral raise. All right, our second to last exercise is one you're going to do with individual legs. This is going to be the split squat. And it's a little awkward with the platform, but I do use it as I still find it is beneficial with the platform as well. So for this one, we will be double looping the band underneath the step platform again, but we are using the J-hook handles to complete this. So of course, use the J-hook handles, put them in first, then lay it flat on the ground, take the step platform, put it on top, and then you kind of have your start position. Just make sure you kind of even out each side of the band so that it's the same length on each side. From there, we're going to take one leg. So I like to usually start with my weakest leg first and put that on the platform. Now, for the balance of this one, with standard split squat, your back foot's usually pretty far back, but you can't do this here because if you do, you risk the platform flying up in front of you as you produce more resistance vertically. So you actually will have to stand a bit more on top of the platform itself. I do recommend you do this. That way the band does not fly up into the air and potentially hit you. So I actually have my back foot pretty close. So you will hit a bit more quad here, but you still will feel it in your hamstrings and glutes pretty well. But just on screen, you'll see that I'm actually pretty close with my knee right behind and my foot right behind the step platform, but it still works just fine. Really just focus on the front leg doing all of the work, and your back leg's just there for a bit of balance. You can even raise off the ground if you wanted to, but I recommend just kind of keeping like toes on the floor, but just kind of keep it there without it doing anything and really focus on the leg on the platform doing all of the work. All right, and the last exercise I have here is going to be the calf raise. So for this one, you'll actually need a wall for this, but you will also need the J-hook handles, resistance bands as well, and the step platform. So of course, to start off, this will be double looped underneath the platform as our hands are just sitting right beside our waist, really. They're not going above our waist though, so it's going to be a double loop setup. But for this one, I like to use a wall because I found it's really hard for me to at least balance without it. You could probably do it without the wall, of course, but what I like to do is kind of lean my forehead against the wall, and just then it allows me to really focus on the calves doing all of the work in the exercise. But yeah, so what you're going to do is take the J-hook handles, put them through the loop bands, put it on the ground, take the step platform, put it on top, even out each side, stand on the platform, pick up the handles, And then I usually do feet pretty close together, if not all the way close together. And then we're just gonna do standard calf raises from there. Now, I don't recommend with the setup that you put your heels off the back of the platform. The main reason is if you do and something happens, the platform will fly up in front of you and potentially hit you. So I'd rather just you stand right in the middle of the platform. Yes, you don't get the full stretch of the ankles, but you'll still feel it pretty good, especially as you get more and more tension in the bands you're using when you move on to the tougher bands. But that's it. That is all 11 examples for the resistance loop bands, step platform, handles, even the guard. But I wanted to kind of show you a bunch of different setups so that if you have an exercise that isn't one of these, you could probably find a way to mimic it and get set up for whatever exercise it might be. For example, shrugs I didn't put in here, but it would be very similar to the calf raise setup, except I wouldn't use a wall as balance. I would just stand there and then just do shrugs with the handles from that position. So there's a bonus 12th for you, but of course, go ahead and try these out with your setup, especially if you have the exact one I'm using here. If you don't have that equipment, I will throw the links to all this equipment in the description below if you want to check any out.